This one time I shall spare you, and not grant your wish. All who have learned my true name are now either dead, or have met an even worse fate. Gaunter O'Dimm, Master Mirror, the Man of Glass, the Merchant of Mirrors, or to some blissfully ignorant folk, simply a mangy vagrant with an eccentric affinity for word games and tricky riddles. Whatever you choose to call this man, beware of what he promises, for Gaunter O'Dimm grants anybody whatever they wish, yet not precisely whatever they want, and that subtle distinction becomes abundantly clear to any foolish enough to cross him. It is a common trend for romantic humans to dress stories up with pretty words and descriptions, and for that reason, one would expect an encounter with a sinister being from beyond our realm to be unforgettably noteworthy. In reality, however, that is not how things work. Don't let his ordinary face and humble style deceive you, for Gaunter O'Dimm does not advertise his true power at face value. No, he is often overlooked, and in being underestimated he is capable of revealing the true nature of his subjects. For those of you unfamiliar with the frightening truth behind the humble mirror merchant, you must be wondering what exactly I'm rambling on about. Well, in this video I'm going to delve into this character steeped in mystery, and by the end you'll know everything there is to know about the ominous O'Dimm. Hey guys, my name is Drew and welcome back to my Witcher lore and mythology series. In this video I'm going to tackle arguably the most fascinating character in the entire Witcher universe, and as usual we'll be going beyond the events of the games to speculate on all of the information we have, relying on real-world religion and folklore to support our arguments. The moral of this story, in the case of Gaunter O'Dimm, is that the devil is in the details. So let's get started. Our encounters with the Mirror Merchant take us back to the beginning of our journey in the year 1272 to the small settlement of White Orchard. It's easy to forget about this detail, what with the search for Ciri and the conflict with the Wild Hunt, but little did Geralt know that something far more threatening than even Eredin, the king of the Wild Hunt, sat across the table from him at the White Orchard Inn. After providing Geralt with information on Yennefer's whereabouts, Gaunter states that we men of the road must stick together. Perhaps one day I'll be in trouble and you'll be nearby to help. And how right he turned out to be. Mind you, he says all of this moments after telling Geralt that he isn't omniscient. And so, after some time passed, and the Northern Kingdoms were saved from the clutches of the Wild Hunt, Geralt finds himself in dire straits, both figuratively and literally. Geralt is aboard a ship headed for Ophir after inadvertently slaying the Ophiri prince who had been transformed into a monstrous toad by Olgierd von Everec. O'Dimm offers to free Geralt from imprisonment in exchange for his cooperation, thus thrusting Geralt into a pact which granted him a brand on the side of his face. As far as pacts with O'Dimm are concerned, the Witcher got off lightly. Now aside from the Man of Glass seemingly appearing out of thin air into the hold of the ship, there is a peculiar supernatural event that is worth delving into. O'Dimm frees Geralt from captivity by unorthodox means, choosing to wreck the ship in a dangerous storm rather than simply conjuring a key or performing some trick on the cell's bars. After O'Dimm vanishes, the storm arrives out of nowhere, and Geralt finds himself washed up on shore, where he must fight the Ophiri soldiers to save his hide. It's quite easy to suspend your disbelief in a world where sorcerers and magicians can achieve magnificent feats with the flick of a wrist. Take the Land of a Thousand Fables for instance, which I covered in a previous episode of the series. But we will soon get confirmation that O'Dimm is no mage, and hates the artificial nature of spells and sorceries. So, assuming he is being earnest, how else could he control Mother Nature, bending the realms of possibility to create a natural disaster from nothing? Well, many people familiar with O'Dimm theorise that his initials, G-O-D, should be taken quite literally, and while that is quite a logical leap, instances like this make it seem plausible. Throughout the Old Testament of the Bible, there are references to God influencing the weather, and it is explicitly stated that the devil cannot control the weather without the help of God. According to the Book of Psalms, chapter 148, verse 8, storms do his bidding. But there are plenty of other examples to support this. In the story of Jonah, chapter 1, verse 4, the Lord sent out a great wind, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea. Also, in the story of Job, chapter 1, verse 16, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. There's also obviously the story of Noah and his ark. But anyway, while it is heavily implied that Gaunter O'Dimm shares some similarities to the devil, I thought it would be interesting to note that, by real-world biblical standards, we can argue that Master Mirror is actually more powerful than the Satan we know from Judeo-Christian teachings. But I'd hate to jump the gun, as for all we know so far, Gaunter O'Dimm could be little more than a trickster, counting on pure chance to predict the change in weather. Geralt is called to the crossroads of Yantra at midnight to rendezvous with the Man of Glass. And this location is more than just a tranquil, secluded spot. If you watched my video on the Fiends and Chorts, or know a bit about religious portrayals of the devil, you'll know that crossroads seem to play a pivotal part in encounters with the forces of hell. In the Fiends and Chorts video, I made the point that meetings and bargains with the devil, or with demon ambassadors of the devil, usually take place at crossroads. And in a passage from the Malleus Maleficarum, a book dedicated to identifying Satanists and witches, there is an example of one of these meetings. Then, when the devil has come, we sacrifice to him a black cock at 2 crossroads. So with that in mind, Master Mirror's choice of meeting place proves to be quite symbolic. It is also at this meeting that Geralt learns of O'Dimm's disdain for spells and sorcery, denying Geralt's assertion that he is in fact a mage. Now, Geralt's agreement with O'Dimm sees him granting the 3 wishes of Olgierd von Everec, a man whose pact with O'Dimm we will get into shortly. But the first of these tasks requires Geralt to show Olgierd's brother the time of his life. This wish isn't very important to deciphering who Gaunter O'Dimm is, but there is one important secret nestled within the dialogue of this quest. When Geralt rows himself and his lover Shani out into the lake, it's quite a picturesque scene beneath the twilight, where the moon shines brightly down to reflect upon the lake. Shani asks Geralt to row her to the moon, to which Geralt responds, "Gotta fly to get to the moon." Shani then says, "You're dead wrong. Look, it's right there in the middle of the lake," pointing to the moon's reflection in the water. The foreshadowing here is almost tangible, and the significance of that statement will make a lot of sense soon, as it perfectly represents Master Mirror's fondness for wordplay and riddles. Sometime later, in the wish to acquire Olgierd the house of Maximilian Borsodi, we get a subtle glimpse at Gaunter O'Dimm's apparent omnipresence. He has a knack for appearing in the thick of the action, usually going completely unnoticed. In fact, I'd wager my soul that many of you didn't even notice the multiple times O'Dimm was much closer to you than you thought. I certainly didn't on my first playthrough. During the auction at the Borsodi's auction house, O'Dimm can be spotted in the background disguised as an aristocrat, only visible for a matter of moments. And that's only the first time. While recruiting a safecracker for the heist, O'Dimm can be spotted once again, this time posing as a peasant in the village of Alness, while the people are distracted by the spectacle put on by the cuckolded Casimir. There is one more instance of O'Dimm hiding in plain sight, this time as a crossbow-wielding Redanian during the hostage negotiation in the auction house. As is often the case for this underestimated meagre mirror merchant, the devil is in the details. As the story progresses, we learn more about the nature of Olgierd von Everec's pact with O'Dimm. Despite being born into an influential family, the von Everecs fell upon hard times, and this nearly lost Olgierd his potential betrothal to the love of his life, Iris Bilovitz. This resulted in Iris being promised to an Ephiri prince. This is the very same prince Olgierd transformed into a hideous toad. Now, we don't have the exact words of Olgierd's agreements with O'Dimm, but we know the outcome. Olgierd's wealth and power was restored, his marriage to his love, Iris, was also restored, and he wished to live like there's no tomorrow. But in exchange for his love, he had to sacrifice his brother, and in exchange for immortality, his heart slowly turned to stone, preventing him from savouring the very things he'd so dearly longed for in the first place. Interestingly, this plot point seems to be inspired by the German fairy tale Das kalte Herz, in which the protagonist is granted 3 wishes from a forest spirit, known as Glas Männlein. Later in the same tale, the protagonist cuts a deal with an evil sorcerer, Hollander Michel, who takes his heart and gives him a heart of stone in exchange for infinite money. During Olgierd's 3rd wish, at the von Everec estate, we learn a couple of interesting things. Firstly, if we take the rose from Iris, the peculiar pet conjured by Olgierd to keep Iris company will issue Geralt a warning. Seek salvation in glass that cannot be broken. More foreshadowing, and more riddles. The other thing we learn is of Olgierd's attempts to contact O'Dimm with black magic. The tragic reality of Olgierd's life with Iris unfolds, and it would take a heart of stone not to feel for the doomed couple. Olgierd was never successful in summoning Master Mirror, but we learn of his methods, drawing a chalk pentagram in a circle of candles. In real life, a reversed pentagram, with 2 points projecting upwards, is a symbol of evil and attracts sinister forces because it overturns the proper order of things, and demonstrates the triumph of matter over spirit. It is the goat of lust attacking the heavens with its horns, a sign execrated by initiates, and as my last video suggested, the Chorts, the goat beasts, may just be linked to O'Dimm, and the presence of an upturned pentagram suggests the summoning of the devil, but alternatively, this process failed to summon O'Dimm. Maybe that's simply because the Man of Glass is far too powerful to show up at the beck and call of every curious mortal, but it could also be because he is more than the devil. The ability to control the weather suggests as much, as do his initials, and there is another piece of evidence that comes to fruition when we meet with O'Dimm in the Alchemy Tavern after completing the final wish. The Alchemy Tavern is bustling, and one excessively inebriated patron chose the wrong conversation to interrupt. In order to engage in a conversation with the Witcher, O'Dimm stops the clock, freezing everyone but himself and Geralt in place. Geralt may have an aversion to displays of emotion, but even he cannot help but be impressed by this trick. It is now when Geralt presses O'Dimm for more information on his true identity, getting confirmation that he is not in fact a djinn or a demon. Nevertheless, O'Dimm withholds this information, claiming that all who have learned my true name are now either dead or have met an even worse fate. This can be construed to simply mean O'Dimm disposes of anyone who learns too much about him, but it also implies that those who learn too much about him are driven to insanity. There is an example of a person who studied O'Dimm in great detail that we'll talk about in a moment, but for now, I'd like to speculate that maybe those who learn enough about him are simply struck by an overwhelming barrage of nihilistic depression. If the fact that Gaunter O'Dimm may be the true god of the Witcher universe, it is not beyond the realm of belief for mortals to feel utterly hopeless. If the omnipotent overseer of life itself is someone as severely sadistic as Gaunter O'Dimm, any hope of enlightenment or a peaceful afterlife goes right out the window, for the Man of Glass doesn't seem like the kind of guy to offer a heaven to his subjects. Anyway, the important part of this meeting is the stopping of time, and this is the next damning piece of evidence that seems to suggest Gaunter O'Dimm is the almighty god of this universe. There are two instances in the Old Testament of the Bible that saw the Lord freeze time. The first was in chapter 10 of the book of Joshua. In this chapter, God froze the sun and moon in place to give Joshua the advantage in battle with 5 wicked kings. The day God gave the Amorites up to Israel, Joshua spoke to God, with all Israel listening. Stop, sun, over Gibeon. Halt, moon, over Ajalon Valley. And sun stopped. Moon stood stock still until he defeated his enemies. The sun stopped in its tracks in midday, just sat there all day. Joshua, chapter 10, verses 12 to 14. The second incident was when King Hezekiah, on his deathbed, wanted to stop the clock and preserve his life. God was moved and gave him 15 more years. Watch for this. As the sun goes down and the shadow lengthens on the sundial of Ahaz, I'm going to reverse the shadow 10 notches on the dial. And that's what happened. The declining sun's shadow reversed 10 notches on the dial. Isaiah chapter 38 verse 8. In this second example, not only do we see God stopping time, but he also comes to a man with a wish beyond mortal capability. Only unlike O'Dimm, there was no catch, no tricky wordplay to condemn Hezekiah to some circle of hell. The more we see of these examples, the more it seems that Gaunter O'Dimm embodies the traits and powers of both God and Satan. Perhaps in the Witcher universe, these entities are one and the same. O'Dimm warrants Geralt and Olgierd to meet him at the ruins of the Temple of Lilvani, but before we get there, Shani supplies Geralt with some important information on O'Dimm. Apparently, a professor named Premathene Shakeslock was contracted by Von Everett to learn all there is to know about Master Mirror, and unsurprisingly, this came with some gruesome consequences. Shakeslock was a teacher at the Oxenfurt Academy, and had spent years scrutinizing every manifestation of black magic. But it was when he focused his attention on the Mirror Merchant when things went downhill. You'd think a learned man with such knowledge of the occult would be intimidated by very little, but even he refers to Gaunter O'Dimm as evil incarnate. According to his research, there are records of encounters dating back thousands of years, in many cultures, under many names, but the common thread was that Gaunter was always portrayed as evil incarnate. In deciphering the ancient scrawlings, Shakeslock went blind, conveniently prevented from ever unveiling the truth. The professor's research was so thorough that O'Dimm himself paid the man a visit. Now, Shakeslock lives within a circle of runes, with a pentagram of chalk very similar to that which Olgierd had used in an attempt to contact the merchant. Despite being blind, Shakeslock saw him clear as day. O'Dimm drew the circle and said the professor would be safe within it. However, were he to set foot outside of the circle, the weakened ceiling brace would certainly kill him, and during the conversation, a falling roof beam causes him to do exactly that. He stepped back, loosening a heavy bookshelf, and even though Geralt caught the falling shelf, Shakeslock slips on a bottle and breaks his neck on a chest. quite the coincidence. Before his death, we learn Shakeslock's main takeaway from the research. O'Dimm plays with his victims and thrives on pacts above all else. He wields contracts, word traps, duels of wits. Challenge him to such a duel and he will accept, and through this he can be defeated. But with Gaunter O'Dimm, the stakes are always high, and you must wager your soul. Aside from the additional information we learn about O'Dimm from Shakeslock, there is a small detail that is significant in his house that can be easily overlooked. On the floor above, we can see a broken mirror. This does not seem important right now, but soon that will be made clear when we come to a certain riddle. This little clue gives us a good idea of just how much Shakeslock had learned about the mirror merchant's mind game. If only he'd lived a little longer. Now it's time to go to the meeting place, which Gaunter O'Dimm was very particular about. When Olgierd made his pact with Master Mirror, he put in place certain requirements before the merchant could obtain his soul. First, there was the 3 wishes, which were now fulfilled, but the second term was Olgierd's failsafe. In order for O'Dimm to outwit Von Everich, they needed to be standing upon the moon. So even when O'Dimm made his ostentatious entrance, walking down from the sky, Olgierd still felt safe. Unfortunately, O'Dimm's experience with riddles and wordplay somehow made the inconceivable totally possible. With a gesture, the dust scattered to reveal an old tile design of the moon on the floor of the Temple of Lilvani, and thus the terms of the contract were met. This part of the story seems to take inspiration from the old Polish folk legend of Mr. Twardowski. In this tale, the pact specified that the devil could only collect the nobleman's soul when the nobleman visited Rome, which of course the nobleman had no intention of doing. This allowed him to escape his pact until he stayed at an inn called Rizim, which means Rome in Polish, and then the devil came to collect. Once again, the devil is in the details, and he has every right to take his due, but Shakeslock's words of wisdom come to mind now, and the challenge offered by Geralt of double or nothing is too lucrative for O'Dimm to pass up. Geralt is then sent to a hellish realm of illusions and tricks, and he is posed a riddle. The riddle goes as follows: To all things and men I appertain, and yet by some am shunned and disdained. Fondle me and ogle me till you're insane, but no blow can harm me, cause me pain. Children delight in me, elders take fright, fair maids rejoice and spin. Cry and I weep, yawn and I sleep, smile and I too shall grin. What am I? Many distractions lie between Geralt and the answer to the riddle. Shani can be found desperately hanging from a broken bridge, calling for Geralt to help. Many monsters in obscure shadowy forms can be found to block the witch's path. A legendary sword lies buried in the stone awaiting a new wielder. There is even a cave overflowing with golden gemstones. Love and material possession. Gaunter O'Dimm knows what lies within the hearts of humans, and will abuse these desires to win the wager. The riddle world is set up to give Geralt one predictable red herring. Smile and I too shall grin. Of course he's talking about a mirror. But that painfully obvious solution is met with broken glass whenever Geralt tries to find O'Dimm. It is now that we must reminisce about past experiences and clever foreshadowing. Shani on the lake. If only the situation were as delightful as it had been that night. Row me to the moon. Look, it's right there, in the middle of the lake. Shani spoke of the reflection in the still water. And how about Iris von Everich's otherworldly animals? Seek salvation in glass that cannot be broken. Is that why we saw a broken mirror in Shakeslock's study? Was he trying to solve the very same riddle, only to no avail? Maybe that's how he wound up in the circle of death in the first place. It would have been uncharacteristic of O'Dimm to place him there without winning a wager of sorts first. Regardless, Geralt had no intention of going the way of the blind man. No, Geralt heeded the hints of his dear friends and lover, and looked to the reflection in the fountain, where Master Mirror's menacing visage could be seen hiding. When Geralt caught him, his human charade was faltering, his eyes were like a serpent's, his jaw and cheeks gaunt and demonic. He then speaks in a haunting tone, adopting 3 foreign tongues. First, in Antillean Creole French, he says, "You're a cock, and the cock is king only atop his pile of manure." This figure of speech essentially means, you're a proud fool, and you can't even begin to grasp your own insignificance. The second sentence is in Georgian, and it translates to, you think you've won. No, you are wrong. And finally, in Ossetian, an Eastern Iranian language, I can't die, I'm going now, but I'll be back. And with Olgierd von Everich's soul rescued from the clutches of evil, there is little more to be said about Gaunter O'Dimm. There are a few literary references that seem to have inspired CD Projekt Red's character, and these come from the works of Stephen King. In King's interconnected universe of stories, there is a character known as Randall Flagg, who is alluded to be the devil. This becomes interesting as the character seems to adopt many different monikers in his appearances throughout the literature. In The Dark Tower, for instance, he is known as Gaunter O'Dimm, and then in Needful Things, the evil entity who owns the shop is named Leland Gaunt. Put the two together and we have Gaunter O'Dimm. There is one other significant reference to the influence of Gaunter O'Dimm that's worth talking about, but I regret to say that will have to wait, as I intend to cover it in great detail in a video coming very soon. I'll tell you this much, Master Mirror has doomed yet another soul who spurned his humble merchant persona, and this occurrence takes us to the land of Toussaint. So, to conclude, we know that demons and jinns have a strong connection with wishes and pacts, in which the soul is at stake, but we've heard out of the horse's mouth that Master Mirror is neither of these things. We can also trust that Gaunter O'Dimm is no mere sorcerer. Not only did he admit to disliking spells, but our encounter with him has proven he is capable of far, far more. The evidence and speculation surrounding the mysterious figure seems to be split down the middle. Some things seem to suggest that Gaunter O'Dimm is the devil, while others would lean towards the fact that he is more than a scorned angel, insisting that he is in fact God. I personally like to believe that Gaunter O'Dimm is a combination of the two. The Witcher universe is full to the brim with suffering and tragedy for the vast majority of the world's inhabitants who weren't important enough to be the centerpiece to any stories of gallantry. Life consisted of working yourself to death, or alternatively, working until some horrific external force killed you before the work could. The romantics who shoot for the stars, seeking out unimaginable powers to grant their wishes and desires, were instead cursed and left to wallow in the remains of what they wished for. Maybe I'm being a bit of a nihilist here, but I can't help but think of the mortals driven to madness after learning the true identity of Gaunter O'Dimm. Were they to discover that the god they pray to every night was in actuality this monster, they'd be hard pressed not to die from grief. And on that pleasant note, I'll end the video. I hope you enjoyed the latest installment of my Witcher series, delving into the fascinating character of Gaunter O'Dimm. If you had fun, maybe give the video a like. Your support means the world to me. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Drew, and I will see you later.